Hello and welcome back. In this lecture, we're gonna learn about Azure Migrate. Within this Migrate, we are gonna specific to SQL Database. So we initially talked about the servers. Now we are gonna talk about databases. So within this lecture, we are gonna learn from Microsoft SQL 2017 on-premises database to we will migrate to on-premises to Cloud Database Service. So this database services can be anywhere. It's not just on a Windows. It can be on a Linux, even the Oracle, or from AWS, or from Google. A different MongoDB, a different version of the databases also can be migrated, and they can easily onboard it to Microsoft Azure. And this is where Microsoft Azure Migrate service will help you with respect to databases. So that's what we're going to learn. And we also talked earlier about VDI and web apps and data box, also options which are available. But within this lecture, we will be focusing with the database. To begin with this, we have to actually create a project to do as a first thing, as a project to be created, and also select your resource group and give a name for your project. So in my case, I'm going to give a project name here like SQL database specific, and also I'm gonna stick to geography as United States. Later point, just create that would actually create a project. So as you know that the project will help you to populate the data that you have selected. Let's say on this project I have selected from a change button to this database. If at all I have a different project, I could have get one more project list and I can switch back all the time. A later point I can actually run the assessment tool. The first thing is the assessment tool. After that, the second thing is the migrate option for the databases. So once we have populated the assessment data with the help of assessment, then we would actually go for the migrate. So to do this assessment, we actually have to follow two steps. The first thing is we need to download DMA. DMA stands for Data Migration Assessment Tool, which is provided by Microsoft, and you can download that from this link. And post to that, you need to install it on a machine as that you wanted to migrate the database. Let's say you have a database on your server called maybe X machine, and on that X machine you need to install this and you have to run that, and that would actually generate the assessment. And later point you can also upload the data to your cloud. That's nothing but your Azure. So for that there would be steps will be there. So we're going to do that as a first step. So I'm going to download that by copying this link, and I would actually paste that link directly on my SQL server, and later point I'm going to install on my SQL server, and I'm gonna do that. So I just pasted that link and I'm gonna download that directly. Since I'm using the older version of Internet Explorer on a server, it doesn't look good, the IE. And then once I downloaded this specific one, it should be downloaded, and later point I can straightforward install the software. So it's a straightforward software, like you have the welcome screen, all that. And if you see here in the backend, I also have the studio management studio, where my SQL server is there, but I did not yet created any database here. So I'm going to create here another database in a minute or so with the temp data, something like that. But let's finish the assessment database. So I'm going to launch the migration assistant also. For this, it actually needs a database to be available on your database. So in my case, I don't have any database. I'm going to create in a minute or so. But I just wanted to show you here how this looks like. Let me maximize. The look is not good in the maximize, but we'll try to work on it. So all I have to do is I have to just click on plus button to create a new project. So first thing is I'm going to actually do the assessment, not the migration. So for the assessment, so here in the assessment I can give the database a project name, something like that, some name for my project, and then my SQL server I can select here. So here the target is Azure SQL Database. So I would select as a SQL and create a project. So from the SQL Server to Azure Database. So I'm going to check for the database compatibility and also the features list. So I think this view is better for Migration Assistant. So and then I'll just click on next. That would actually ask me for the source information. Source is nothing but the machine where you have the database. So in my case, I have now created a backend database called testdb and also have some single table. So I'll just select that by creating here. In the second step, actually it's going to ask me for the SQL Server name and the authentication type, and make sure that if you're using the trusted server certificate, you can choose that. So once you have chosen that, click on connect. That would actually connect to the database, and this is where you can choose what database you want to select for this migration assistant. So in my case, I've selected single database, and once the database is okay, I can simply click on next. So I don't have any additional queries that to be JSON file kind of things to be run on my database. So I'll just use start assessment. So it does all that, and if you see here SQL Server feature parity, I would definitely get some kind of warnings or incompatibility because the database is running with a lower version to higher version. Definitely you can't expect all the features to be available. So I got an error. But if you look at the compatibility issues, I don't have anything because my SQL features are from SQL Server 2017. That's why I got some kind of SQL database does not support the trace flags, all that, which is showing that all fine because I'm just wanted to migrate my database, not the all that tables, all that to be migrated, but not the other trace flags and all that information. So I'll simply choose the compatibility, and then I will check if anything or errors are there. So here there are no errors listed, so I'm good to go. And now the next step is to upload this information to Azure Migrate. So when I select here as Azure, so when I say click on connect, it's going to pop up a simple window with my user details to be punched here. So I'm gonna give here the subscription which I own, where I had created this migration job project within Microsoft Azure. So I'll just sign in with that ID and I'll choose my subscription. So oops, I have the multi-factor authentication, so I need to press that, and then it's gonna ask me for the subscriptions. If I have more than one, it will be listed here. So I have in fact more than one, so I'll just choose one, which is a pay-as-you-go model one, and then I'll choose my project name, so which we have created earlier. So this upload would take some time based on the time and the speed and the size of your data. So upload completed. So I'll switch to Microsoft Azure portal and I'll do a quick refresh, because if you see here, there's no data here, anything here, right? Or here, there's no data. So when I refresh, the refresh, once it is completed, it's actually going to populate. So now it's going to populate this as the database instance 1, assessed by one database, ready for SQL, for Azure. All that information is populated. That's good. So as a next step, actually, I need to go for the site migration. That's nothing but the SQL database migration. But if I just had a look on assessed instances, I can see here 100% every database is compatible. That's what it is showing. So the next step is to start using the migration. So what happens is Azure Migration is a service which is again additional service which is available within Microsoft Azure portal. So you need to simply search for Azure Database Migration Services in the marketplace, and then you get it, Microsoft Azure Database Migration Services, and just create a database migration service. So this is a PaaS service actually, where you can migrate different things here, not just the SQL, even from one Amazon, from Amazon ODS, or maybe different databases can be migrated, including Google, all that too here. So I'm going to give here a name which will be used for migration service name. So I can give some name without any spaces here. I can give, so just for the name purpose to identify, here I'm just giving database migration temp TB demo, and this is very important, the pricing tag. So if you see here, you have a standard, premium, and when you choose the standard, you are actually getting here, if you see here, offline migration only. So this is the only difference. And if you choose a premium, you can also do the online migration, and also you have the more power with the premium as the 4 cores, and also you can expand the cores and all that, but the pricing would actually differ. When you change the cores, it's gonna change the pricing, so that's fine, but we are actually using the standard one and in this case. And then once we have chosen the premium as that, I'm gonna actually selecting as the next as the networking component. So in my case, this migration service is going to access with the help of a VNet without any additional site-to-site VPNs or gateways. It's going to access because my SQL database I'm going to create, because the destination, see, let's say we talked earlier as the source as your on-premises 2017 SQL database, which we have opened from this RDB, right? And now we wanted to have one database which is coming from Microsoft Azure. That's where we are gonna migrate. This is source and this is going to be destination. So here in the destination, within this we are actually creating Azure database. So this Azure database, we wanted to migrate everything here. For this we need something called migration service. So what we are doing is, in between that we are actually creating a migration service. So this migration service, which is very helpful, in other way it has to actually connect to your on-premises SQL as well as to your cloud SQL. So that's your source and destination. Between it has to connect, and it's gonna play that role as a middleman service kind of thing. So for doing that, it is needed to have a VNet here. So this is where I'm actually selecting my Azure VNet here. So that VNet would actually used to communicate with our destination of the SQL Server. And similarly, here, if I have a site-to-site already VPN or something like that, I can actually connect here. So in my case, actually, this also coming from a machine which has pinned up here, and this also uses the same unit. So I no need to go for site-to-site VPN. Other than that, everything is good. So let's actually review and create that. So I'm ignoring tags and reviewing, creating. So I'm going to create. So once I have created the migration service, I need to actually have my SQL Server, that's Azure SQL Server, as a destination, and it should be ready case. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually, if I don't have the SQL database, I have to create, but if I have one, I will be using that. That's what I'm going to do it. And I submitted that, so it's going to validate, and it might take a minute or so to complete this deployment of for the migration, and it has completed now. So I'll just go to the service, and you see here this is nothing, and it always talks about, hey, this is the successfully created migration project specific database, and you can run a migration project from here to continue further. But we don't have a project yet, because we have to look for destination SQL database. So I'm going to show you my database. If I have anything, I can show you, but I don't have anything. So I'm going to create my SQL database also for this demo purpose. So I'll select my resource, and this is a very normal database think that this is again SQL Server specific within the Azure, and this becomes as a database. So if you're quite new, this becomes as your database, and this becomes as your SQL Server. So as you know, on a SQL Server you can have multiple databases. So since we don't have anything, we are actually creating as a first database, and later point within this database server we are going to actually have a database called My SqL DB here. So let's actually enter here my user ID and password so that I can log into that database server with that user ID and the password. So let me type it here, and I'm choosing as the ECS as a location. And here again, if you want to use Elastic Pool, all that you can enjoy the benefits of Elastic Pool and other things, but I'm not going to use that because I just wanted a basic database now. And also this database should be available for me to access from a different networks. So I'm going to choose here as a public, as well as I'm going to actually Azure services resources to allowing the services to access along with this current IP address of my machine. And also I'm not choosing any advanced security because later point is going to charge me, so I don't want that. And just for this demo I'm going to do that. So it's going to see whatever the money it's going to charge. I'm fine with that for this demo. And create SQL database. So it's going to create the SQL database for us. So the deployment is completed. If you're quite new and you don't know how to create the SQL database, you can check out other lectures of mine and how to create the SQL Server and all of that. But this is just a quick steps that we have demonstrated here on how to create SQL Server. And the SQL Server, once it is created, I'm just doing a little bit of changes in my firewall to hello. So I'm just selecting my existing VNet. We talked about the destination and here as a middleman, right, all that. So we just enable that VNet to connect. As a next step, I'm actually going to migration service, and now I'm gonna start a project. So this is where the migration project actually starts. So in this project I'm gonna actually choose the source and destination. So the project name I'm entering here, and the source type you would be seeing here, not just the SQL Server. It can be AWS, it can be Google, it can be Oracle, MySQL, MongoDB, AWS RDS, PostgreSQL, all that. So in our case, just a SQL Server to Azure SQL Server database. So I have chosen that, and this time, since we have the premium, we can go for if you remember, the migration service when we are trying to create, we have chosen as a tied as the premium. So we can go for either online or offline or just the schema only. So I'm going to choose as a schema only, just to test how the skeleton works and how the skeleton is available. So I'll just choose the schema, but you can check out the online data migration, what it is actually asking. So you need to have a full database. It's gonna backed up if it's online. So I'm just choosing the schema and create and run activity. So when I click on that, actually it's gonna progress to the next blade with a steps of 4 to 5 different things. It's gonna ask, like, what's your source? This is what your source details. So in my case, my source is the IP address which is within that VNet. I can give and my authentication type, all that to be given. So if I just remember my IP address, I can enter there, and also the SQL username. So I just entered the details here as my SQL Server IP, which is this IP as internal, and I have chosen as a Windows authentication. And make sure if it is a Windows authentication, you should give the domain name / your user ID, and then click on the password. And if really need it, and give your certificate also. In our case, we have to choose the trusted server certificate also. So I gave and clicked on save. So now the source is finished. Now it's time for us to enter the target details. And you remember the target is Azure Database which we created. So let me show you one more time. If you're confused, just go to Azure portal and the SQL database, Azure SQL, and then you have the database which we created. called demo DB for migration destination. So what I'll do is I'll simply copy this database name, that's a server name, complete server name, because within that server we have a database. So I'll just enter that server name, and the database type authentication is always, it's going to be SQL authentication. So I'll just enter DB, because by default that's the SQL authentication which is configured on Azure Database. So I'll just enter that user ID and password, which will accept. So if you see here, we entered here source. Now the target is completed. Now we are going to select the database as well as their schema. Then we'll finish the schema import or the migration steps. Then we can go for the full database like offline or online method, so that we are sure. So here we are going to select as the test database, and the target is My SQL Demo. You remember the server which we have given? So that server database. So I'm going to choose here generate from source or schema, whatever we want. We can choose that. And I've actually chosen here schema only migration, and I can give this could be a project one for job one, or maybe a schema only, all that name as a task name. So because this is going to be just a job which is going to run for us, and I'll just enter here some name, and when I run this job it takes some time to complete that activity as a backend. Once it's done, I should be able to check the status of this run migration job. So if you see here, it's still running. I should be able to actually do the refresh as soon as I have completed. So I'm gonna do the refresh in the backend, and you see here it's still running. I'm gonna do one more refresh. I just completed, and it took around 11 seconds. And now it's time for us to do one more migration project, because earlier we have done for the schema. So now we're going to do the offline. So full database migration, I'm going to choose as the offline this time. Type of activity, and create a run activity. So this is again going to ask that 4 to 5 steps which we entered earlier, similar steps like we have done. If I just left side scroll, if I just do the left side scroll, and you can see here as the source and the target and target databases and the migration settings, which is the full offline, not just a schema this time, and that's going to finish the database migration. So I did even enter here my SQL Server instance, which is this, which I have done the RDE for this IP, and this is installed as the Windows authentication, and also this user ID and the password and the SQL Server authentication. So click on save. That's going to save and validate the source. If something wrong, you're going to get error here. And then the target is nothing but the SQL database which we have created on Azure. So I'm going to choose that. So I'll just go back and I'll show you. So this is the SQL Server which we have created for the destination, right? So I'm going to enter that name here. Oops, it's actually in the minimize, so I'll just maximize so that you can easily see. And it's a SQL authentication. I'm gonna choose the user ID for that user for authentication purpose, and click on save. That would actually saves my target. So now source is completed, target is completed, but the database is not completed. So we need to look for what database we're going to migrate, right? So we're going to migrate test DB from my USCA SQL01. That's the on-premises SQL, and then click on save and configure migration settings. So this is the database size is 16 MB. It's a smaller one, just wanted for demo purpose. And configuring is completed. So I just have to select what are the tables, or it's going to come all that. And if I just take you to my SQL Server, and you can see after connecting, you see here just the one table is there. And if I just go back as your portal, click on save. So here I can give as the activity name as a DB Migrate earlier, and this would take some time. So I can simply click refresh. Earlier what we have done, similar thing. So it's completed and it took 0 seconds, in fact, because the schema is already there. So it just delta what it has taken. The database is single table it has, so it's nothing. So if I just go to my database name, which is my Azure SQL database, so I'll just go to this database and I'll just copy the server name. What I'm trying to do is I'm going to try to connect from my studio management, SQL management studio, and then try to see what happens. So here authentication is always the Windows authentication, not accepted, so SQL authentication. So I need to choose here my SQL authentication ID, that's a PaddyMaddy, and then the password, what is the password, and then click on connect. So I should be able to connect to my SQL database, which was now migrated and available on my Azure Cloud. So you see here the database is has the same table, whatever it is. So I can simply just right click and select the top 100 rows or something like that. If I have whatever it is, it's going to show me. So I have just the 3 information as a name. Same thing I can see in my database, which is from the on-premises. So it's quite easy and very useful for the migration. So most of the things actually works based on the database migration assistance, which is DME in short we call, which is very useful. I hope this lecture is very useful. You can actually try to do these database migrations, because it's not just the one type of the database. You might encounter with a lot of different database types. So I haven't covered everything, but you can give it a try, and most of the time all these steps are very similar, but the only thing is the database gets changed. And I hope this lecture is useful for you. Thank you for watching this.